international members as well. John and Jannell do have a PowerPoint presentation for you. You can remain in your seats if you would like, but I would actually recommend if you're towards the front that you relocate. It'll be easier to view.
Are the slides available to us, Matt?
I would be happy to email them over if you.
Yeah, so but we don't have them tonight.
No.
Correct. So welcome, Jannell and John. Pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Just give us a moment to relocate. I'm going to dim a few of the lights for you.
That's perfect. So a few months ago, John Armstrong, the Director of Off-Campus Student Services, and I, Jannell Mullen, Assistant Town Planner and Zoning Agent, attended the International Town Gown Conference in Chicago. As Matt mentioned, ITGA is a resource for addressing challenges, emerging issues, and opportunities between and amongst institutions of higher education and the communities in which they reside. This evening, we will discuss the common themes to ITGA, the similarities that we recognize across university towns, and then we will follow by an outline of the progress that we've made as a partnership and follow with the lessons that we've learned and what we would like to look to in the future.
We'd first like to start with talking about the common themes we saw in college towns, lifestyles between differences between students, permanent residents, long-standing residents, which impacts the quality of life, property upkeep, management concerns, and the need for diverse housing options. First and foremost, one of the things that we saw as an underlying theme, and it permeated all presentations, all conversations that we saw at the International Town and Gown Association conference, was that neighborhood stabilization is a very broad theme. It means many things to different towns, means many things to different college administrators, university administrators. Specifically, the concept of quality of life, which was mentioned earlier, issues of littering, code violations, overcrowding behavior. These are all learning curves that we see as, in some cases, our students move off campus and they begin to live a life for the first time in a rental. So quality of life issues is something that can be impacted in communities, and we see that here in Mansfield.
And a central theme to all of the discussions considered at the conference was also housing and the question of where is it located in a university town, how is it being used, how is it being accessed, is there enough, and also is it available for a diverse range of users. That's a really compelling component of what was addressed at ITGA.
We thought it would be helpful for everyone to see a timeline. One of the things that we realized coming back and going to ITGA is that a number of initiatives that we have initiated since 1992 with the onset of the Town University Relations Committee that formed in 1992 and is still meeting today, it actually meets tomorrow, is one of the first initiatives that the Town University did together back in 1992, over 20 years ago. Additionally, the Yukon Student Code extends off campus. That is something the university did purposefully to help our students understand what it means to be a good citizen. So if a student is either on campus, off campus, studying abroad, or whether they are on spring break, the student code will impact them if their behavior steps beyond the bounds of what we expect.
Oftentimes, I think we put a lot of attention to what we're not doing, but it's important to note that we are doing many things towards this theme of neighborhood stabilization. The off-street parking plan requirement and the rental registration requirement of the Building and Housing Department was quite advanced in conversations that I've had as a town agent. A lot of agents addressed me asking me how we kept things so organized, how we understood the catalog of rental housing in town, how we understood where it's located. So I think it was really important to note that we are progressing in that aspect as partners, and that recently the Ad Hoc Committee on Rental Housing and Enforcement formed to address these issues and to further discuss striking a balance within Mansfield and with the University of Connecticut. So adding on to the timeline, enforcement measures, I think it's important to note that the town ordinances are enforced to all residents of Mansfield. Oftentimes, it isn't always recognized, or students don't always recognize that they are indeed residents of Mansfield. As zoning agent, that's usually the first conversation that I do have following up enforcement.
I thought I would take a moment to talk about the student code. The student code at UConn is one that oftentimes is misinterpreted by many as something that it can do more than it actually can. The student code at UConn really impacts a student when their behavior has an adverse impact on a community, specifically any community in which they're living. Earlier, Matt had given some examples of an incident that occurred over the past week and a weekend before. Those are good examples. Those are good examples of how the student code does have an impact on the community and impacts people around them. I want to point out specifically that the student code around overcrowding, blight and trash, off-street parking, rental registration, these are town municipal ordinances. The student code cannot and will not, we cannot enforce those ordinances via the student code. It's not what it's designed for. So I wanted to make a point to talk about that a little bit, and I can take questions later about that.
And I think that's why the partnership is really critical, given that UConn has its interest in addressing the student code, and then the town has a myriad of ordinances and zoning regulations that multiple departments address and enforce. We felt that this slide is important just to spatially show where rental housing is located in Mansfield. I think it's very important to note that not all rental housing is occupied by students, but a commonly occurring theme was that 10% of locations amount for about 60% of the problems. As zoning agent, I cited approximately, I think it was 39 code violations related to overcrowding, and those were related to 15 properties this past semester.
Additionally, at UConn, my office sees all of the referrals from the Connecticut State Police regarding issues that occur at any off-campus location or property. Over the last 3 years, I've been in this role since 2012. My office has seen an average of 25 to 30 different single-family rentals that we have engaged with, which is about 7% of the overall single-family population, total homes. My office is the Office of Off-Campus Student Services. We have two distinct groups that we work with and educate. That is the commuter students and off-campus students. The distinction between those two groups is that the off-campus students live with or adjacent to other UConn students or close to the university. And our commuter student population typically are a group that commutes from home. We typically, when we look at these groups, we program very differently to both groups because they both have very different needs. One of the things that we do at this time of the year, beginning of August, middle of August through the end of September, is we do welcome back visits. Those are joint visits with myself, sometimes the state police. Often Jannell Mullen will join me for these visits. This year, Matt Hart and I both co-signed a letter that is a letter that focuses on some of the conversations I have with students when they're post-behavioral issues when I meet with them. So when a student gets into an issue off campus, I meet with them in my office. I talk with them very pointedly about some of the things that they should understand about this community. They are living in a community. Neighbors around them are children, families, senior citizens, long-standing members of this community. The code of conduct does extend off campus, and they're a member of Mansfield, and they're a resident of Mansfield, so code enforcement does impact them. Matt and I co-signed this letter. This is something that students are getting up front this year. We will see how much of an impact it has, so I thank Matt for that as well. Last year, my office saw a need for more education around the 3 or 4 zoning regulation, which looks at the number of unrelated people that can live in a rental. 4 if it was a rental before August of 2010, and 3 if it was after August of 2010. We created this 3 or 4 no more. We have shared that with the town of Mansfield. We're working in unison with the town of Mansfield to educate students on the fact that if they're living in a rental with more than 4, and that's a number we can look at, there is a problem, and they should be considering that. We have that on our website in all of our publications. We also have an off-campus housing fair. That the off-campus housing fair is something that we invite the town of Mansfield to be part of. And the off-campus housing fair allows students to come, engage with the police, town of Mansfield officials, myself, property managers, and learn more about what it means to live off-campus and be off-campus. Property manager meetings, we have those at least 6 times a year, beginning of every year, mid-semester, end of semester, and these are pointed specifically at engaging with property managers around behavior at their property and programming at their properties. And finally, before students even begin to take classes, we are talking with parents and students at orientation about this community. We're talking about the importance of being in this community and engaging in a positive way in this community, what it means to live off campus.
And as zoning agent, I've made efforts to join John when possible for outreach and education rather than just take on enforcement. I attended the off-campus housing fair. This QR code that you see, it's within the packet that I handed out, that actually pulls up all the rental properties in town so that potential residents can actually verify the occupancy that's allowed. I know that that's decreased some of the calls that we've gotten and also just made the zoning regulations more attainable by residents within the town. And then I do attend the property manager meetings and make myself available just so that I am present if questions come up, and also so that I'm accessible as agent and not just enforcer.
The Community Campus Partnership is a subcommittee of the Town University Relations Committee. It was formerly known as the Mansfield Community Campus Partnership. That was born as a way to look at initiatives we can engage with Spring Weekend on. Given that we've seen a decrease in activity around Spring Weekend, the Community Campus Partnership is a way that we have, my office in the town of Mansfield has engaged in different ways. We've engaged with faith leaders, town officials, property managers through workshop series. One of the things that we are considering with this group is to open it up as a point of contact for members of the community, for police, for town officials, for my office, to look at different ways that we can engage and look at different initiatives that we are considering through my office, through the town of Mansfield, and how we can move those forward. And we're looking at possibly having 3 meetings a year with that committee.
Since the conference, another consideration has been a coordinated complaint response. John and I witnessed this at the conference, whereas universities and towns were duplicating work or weren't following up on instances, and we were just discussing streamlining the communication. We are aware of some universities that map responses, and it's just information sharing essentially. And then finally, an issue that was really brought to light at the conference was just enhance relationships with landlords, with property owners, and with the residents that are involved, and making sure that responsibility is utmost importance within the community, and it's coming from a multifaceted approach.
Finally, we're on to lessons learned. One of the things that we saw at the ITGA is that every town, every college, every location, whether it is in the UK, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in the United States, have these issues. These issues that we see in Mansfield are seen across the country, seen in UK, very similar issues. What we did learn is that these issues and these initiatives and these neighborhood stabilization efforts do not work in every town. Each town, each university has to try different things to see what will work with them. We have tried a variety of them. Something that we are doing, the letter that Matt and I have signatured together, is not something that we saw, but it's a direct way that we can communicate with students. But the bottom line with this last bullet here is that a lot of things are recommended to my office. A lot of things are recommended to the town of Mansfield. It's important to understand that not all of them will work here based on the landscape.
I think essentially there's the component of strong partnerships and strong communication, and just making steps towards improving that and launching initiatives together as partners and understanding the goals of each other and the long-term efficiency of what it is that we're doing, both enforcement and education.
And in closing, the last point, and probably one of the most important points that we can make tonight, is the multi-pronged approach with landlords, property managers, and renters. This is not something that the University of Connecticut, when there is a large event off campus, can fix on our own. It requires that the university maintain extension of the student code off campus. It maintains that we have to keep prevention efforts up with our students off campus. It maintains that we have to be good stewards of our students, and when there is an issue, we will address it, and we do. It also means that the town of Mansfield needs to continue to look at code issues. They need to look at code enforcement issues, zoning issues, approaches to how they can manage some of the issues in some of the rentals. It means that the police, in this case the state police, and in many cases the Yukon police, engage with negative behavior off campus and make appropriate referrals. And finally, and most importantly, the people that manage the properties, the landlords who control the rental, who own that property and manage what happens and what goes into that lease, have to be the people that are part of this solution. They have to be. Thank you for your time.
Thanks to both of you, and I appreciate the two of you working together. And if I actually would have wanted you to have come back from this conference with the silver bullet. It was actually going to solve all our problems, and unfortunately you didn't.
That was typically what everyone first said when we arrived, is there's no silver bullet.
I think those of us who lived in this town for a while know that. But I want to thank you. I would also add one additional difficulty you have, and I see Ms. Raymond and Ms. Moran's hands up. As the parent of a junior who lives off campus at a college in an urban area, in a large urban area with an outstanding public transportation system, you don't have this issue. We are in the opposite of a large urban area. We do not have a strong public. We have a transportation system. It's not a strong public. It's not a robust transportation system, and it doesn't really extend much beyond the areas of town that are directly adjacent to campus. So the problem is in our town. It's not in another borough or someplace else that's a subway right away. It's in our town. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need to get our arms around. I saw Ms. Raymond's hand first.
Yeah, I know and thank you for the presentation and the input, and it was important to hear that information. But I know we like to look at everything as a very highly complicated issue, and there's no silver bullets and that sort of thing. But I think the biggest thing that those of us who have been sort of digging into this for the last several months since it's come before the town is we're a tiny town.
Yeah.
We're 11,500 people.
And I think impacts are felt.
And there's only so many homes, single-family homes, that can be converted to and it's not that I'm against business, it's not, but the bottom line is people with kids and families aren't going to move into this community if their neighbors are going to be students, because that's not the kind of neighborhood you want to raise your kids in. And they may be the greatest people on the face of this planet, but when you're selling a home, you can't convince somebody of that. They're going, oh, my neighbors are going to change every 6 months to a year? We're saturated already. I mean, how many more homes can we convert to single-family homes, to student rentals or rentals, period, before we don't have a town anymore?
Well, I think that the presentation was focused on, all right, this is what we have. We're all on this piece of land together. It's almost like, we can't solve the problems of the Middle East, but we can do some good things. Mm-hmm. And I heard Ms. Raymond's comment as basically looking at the big picture, long term, as to where this is leading us, and I completely understand that, and I think that while we're here now, and I could even add to her comment by saying this is an ideal time because UConn, because of financial constraints, did not significantly add to its it added, but not significantly to its entering freshman class. Now is a good time to try and get our arms around it, which is perfect timing for the Rental Regulation Committee. But I appreciate, and I'll have more ideas tomorrow.
Yes.
This night's gone long enough to hear my voice much longer. But I appreciate what you're doing for those of us who are living in town, and for these students who are 20-year-olds and 20-somethings who are finding their way. Ms. Moran. Followed by Mr. Koch, by Mr. Shaken.
2 points. First of all, I just want to point out that one of the leading factors for this development of town and university relationship has been Betsy Patterson over the years. And she was actually an active member in the National League of Cities Town Gown Committee and chaired it for many years. Mansfield has had connections with these organizations for a very long time. The second point I want to make is totally unrelated to the first. One of the topics that we have heard complaints about is rental homes that are essentially owned by organizations, by sports teams or by fraternities or by sororities. In your discussion, most of what you spoke about was about students as individuals. I think there may be a very real problem with students as groups, and I'm wondering how you are addressing those issues.
Mr. Armstrong.
Ms. Moran, that's a very good point, and you are not mistaken in the fact that there are groups, they do not own homes. The one group I do know that possibly could own a home is 1096 Stores Road, the former SAE, which is no longer recognized by UConn. It is not uncommon for fraternities, specifically sororities, and some athletic teams to rent single-family rentals year after year. They do not own them, to my knowledge. They rent them year after year, and it's how they come to be year after year is we refer to them as legacy homes. So you have one group in there for 1 year, it's passed down and passed down and passed down. So we know that is to be the case. Is it impactful off campus in communities? Yes. We have seen that a lot of activity we have seen is from organized group activity.
Ms. Mullen, do you want to
Yeah, just
respond
to add,
that?
I think it's also important to note the recent change that was made to the ordinances per the ad hoc committee, and that's with the LLC, and just increasing the ownership. I think that can do away with some of this legacy home as institutions that we see established because of the requirement to have that ownership in place. So I think that's hopefully a step in the right direction.
You may follow up, but Mr.
Yeah.
Shaken is waiting.
The question I was really after is, are you dealing with the organizations as you are dealing with the individual students?
Ms. Moran, it might be helpful to talk through the process of how a referral is made to the university and then talk through where it goes from there. Referrals are made to my office via the state police. Sergeant Conor and I talk weekly. When those names are presented to me, we do compare those against rosters to see are they part of an organization. So that is part of our process. If they are part of an organization, is there a conversation with that group? Absolutely. Could there be more done? Yes. So what could more be done? One of my recommendations and something that we would like to look into further is, and this is challenging, but as fraternity groups, sorority groups, athletic groups move off campus, to look to do more education with them before they consider move off campus. Doing that is challenging. We have a high number of off-campus students that live off campus. We do not know where every student lives. We do not know where they're planning to live. So these are challenges that we face when we do this. So looking at organizations as a whole would be a first point of contact.
Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Marcellino. And if you've given up Mr. Shaken, I will call on Mr. Marcellino.
I have not. Thank you, Mayor. I just have 2 points. First, to what you just said, which is that I know we've talked about this before. I think there is some benefit to this whole process to beginning to try to collect the information about where students are living. As a new school year has started, even as we've, as a town, really shifted our focus into enforcement in a really heavy way and getting a handle on the situation in town, we are still finding properties cropping up that haven't registered, that are off the radar, so to speak, and another point of contact into the system. So if someone fills out a piece of paperwork to enroll for classes in the fall and says, I'm going to be living at an address that's not in our system, that would enable us to be proactive instead of reactive in our approach if we have a house that's become a rental and hasn't gone through the necessary process. My second point, and this came up earlier in Mr. Rowe's public comment, was sort of frustration about how long things are taking and what's been done, and I understand that. I think, you know, your chart in your presentation about all the steps that we've taken gets much more concentrated over the last maybe 6 years or so from 1992 to 2000, there was no activity in that chart, for example. And so I think, as part of that is the speed of government, and we have to obviously consider all sides, and that's really important to the action that we take. But we're a bureaucracy. The University of Connecticut's a very large bureaucracy. And what I think we saw this weekend with the parties south of campus along Route 195, I drove past the daytime one, and to Sergeant Canoyer's credit, or the state police in general, I drove past again 5 minutes later and it was over. But on my way past when it was still going on, there were 20 or 30 students walking pretty much in the middle of Route 195, sitting on the curb on the side of the road at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday. I watch out for students on a Saturday night if I'm driving around, even in places where you wouldn't expect them. But at 2 o'clock on a Saturday, I wasn't expecting that, and no one else was either. And it, I think, created a real public safety issue for the students who were walking on the road, not just a neighborhood enjoyment issue for the folks around. So being able to react quickly, even as we pursue long-term changes, I think is a recommendation that I would have to the two of you, to the Town Gown Committee, creating some sort of rapid response as a new problem property pops up and enters into our system to try to nip things in the bud so that we don't have these prolonged issues and create public safety issues while we're working through the longer things.
Thank you. And Mr. Marcellino. Ms. Mullen, did you want to respond to?
I was just going to add to that this goes along the vein of the coordinated complaint response, and that was something that I took away as really, really helpful. The universities that are sharing with the town and vice versa, data and just information about what's going on, and there's a very established protocol in which that happens, so that there's no guesswork of, does this person know about this or does that, to establish such a protocol so that the reaction time is condensed, and that the appropriate parties are in fact dealing with situations, and that the public is also made aware of that, so that if issues do arise, that those people are contacted. But
Mr. Marcellino, John, you.
Apologies. Mr. Mayor, one thing I'd also point out to Mr. Shakin's point is that, agreed, that the parties off campus, the ones that we have seen lately, we have seen some large events that have occurred. One of the things that we saw at ITGA, and it was discussed widely, is the importance of a two-pronged approach with these issues. There has to be two things in place. One, enforcement with landlords. There has to be that, and there has to be enforcement with the renters. So we have nuisance ordinances, we have zoning regulations. If we don't only have one and don't have the other, we will see history repeat itself year after year.
Mr. Marcellino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you talked about the fact that the Code of Conduct also applies to students that are living off campus. So I was wondering if you just maybe have a couple examples of situations in which, what was the behavior of the students off campus that led the university to take some action and hold them accountable?
Certainly. I can start with this year. This year we have seen some large events that have occurred off campus. Any case that is referred to the university, things that we start to look at are aggravating factors. What are some aggravating factors that we consider in making our decisions? The course of 940 Storrs Road is a great example. 940 Storrs Road, not only did it disrupt a church, a restaurant, neighbors, shut down 195, that had an extreme adverse impact on the community at large. Those are all taken into consideration. That is a good example of how we can look at each situation differently. A house party with 30 to 40 people with a low tolerance of the neighborhood saying, I don't want this happening in my neighborhood, the police are called, that's different. We would approach that differently. I have seen in my office of the cases that I deal with myself, when I meet with students and I bring them all into my office and meet with them, one of the things I'm amazed at is how apologetic and how bad the students feel about what they have done. There's an extreme disconnect when a student engages with a party off campus. They invite their friends, social media takes hold, they invite more friends, before they know it, it's bigger than they had expected it to be. When I meet with them, these large parties are not expected to get that big, I can tell you that. I can also say that there's extreme remorse on the students' behalf, and many of them want to go and apologize to neighbors. And what I tell them is an apology is not going to discount the fact that you woke someone up at 2 a.m. or you kept someone up to 2 a.m. Raking their lawn is not going to make up for the fact that you woke them up or disrupted them. What's going to make a difference is to be a good neighbor, period. and that's what we expect. We expect our students to be good students, good neighbors, good citizens, not just here, but well beyond the graduation of the University of Connecticut. So we take into consideration a number of factors when we look at every case.
Well, all right, thank you, but beyond what we can do legally in terms of enforcement of this ordinance and so on, and police and so on, so I'm actually asking what actions had the university done to some of these students in situations where they're extreme versus come in my office and let me talk to you.
Certainly. I can give an example. I will not give locations or names, but I can give an example of 3 years ago. A house on 195 was problematic. Problematic to the point where the student was so disruptive they were arrested. Even upon arrest, they continued to berate the state police, continued after they're in the cruiser. Based on that student's prior history, they were subsequently suspended from the university. Suspension from the university means that if I was suspended today and I was a sophomore, everything I've done to this point in the semester goes away. I have to repeat that semester once again. If I am suspended as a senior in my last semester, I have to repeat that semester. That is 1 year away from the university where you can come back and re-engage. If you are expelled as a student, you no longer can be a University of Connecticut student, you can only be on university grounds. After the student was suspended, 3 months later, that was around December, I visited his house because it was a problematic house with the state police, Sergeant Canoyer. Knocked on the door. The student drove into the driveway with his girlfriend, and he said, I am that student. He was still living at that off-campus rental. And my purpose in telling you this story is the point that even if the university takes the most extreme measures with a student, and that is expulsion, that means that student is no longer connected to the university in any way. They can still live off campus at the rental. The university has no control over that whatsoever. So yes, we have taken actions. The University of Connecticut's student conduct system really is built on progression. If a student has one issue and I talk with them in my office and I send them a letter, that letter is impactful. I have seen 80 to 95% positive rate when I meet with a student of no repeats. So when I meet with a student and tell them, big picture, small picture, them, they get it. So that is impactful. I can say that the meetings in my office do work. They do work with students, and we do not see a lot of repeat offenders after that. I invited some students to come here tonight. I don't know if they did come, but I invited them to come. Thank you. You're welcome.
Mr. Sargent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, thanks for coming. Jannell, thanks for coming. The 3 or 4 No More campaign is relatively new on your behalf. As you see it so far, I know when I was a student at UConn, to be honest, many students were not aware of the 3 or 4 no, and I commend you for putting that campaign going forward. How do you feel that is going so far? Because I know that is a huge issue with off-campus students.
So just since I've been zoning agent, I've definitely noticed an increase. I mean, the enforcement increased initially with overcrowding, so property owners were very quick to let tenants know what was going on as far as the town enforcement ordinances. I think it refreshed their memory of the ordinance, and also as far as the outreach goes, just my outreach on campus, I did receive calls from students that were concerned about their living situation and sort of if their property was registered, et cetera, et cetera. So that line of communication was definitely open, and there was some follow-up enforcement as a result of that. So I believe it was effective.
Mr. Sargent, one of the things that we saw the need for in our office last year was there was a focus on the 3 or 4. We saw that when we talked to students, were they aware of this zoning regulation? They were not. We decided, and I remember coming to a town meeting and talking about this and saying we need to do some education. We went back to my office, prepared this. It has been a great campaign. Students get it. I, for one, meet with USG, External Affairs, which I remember you were chair of at one point. We worked together. Each year, students look at this zoning regulation and say, I want to change it. And each year, I sit at the External Affairs group and say, there is no need to change it. It is working. It is what we need in this town to limit the number of people living in rentals, and I agree with it. It's a good zoning regulation, and we support it.
Additionally, it's been very helpful that it's on the off-campus student services website. If a student is looking for an apartment, there's a very clear disclaimer. Mansfield language has gone into that so that it's very clear if you're looking for an apartment, you're subject to these ordinances. So I believe that's been a very helpful piece with enforcement and education.
Thank you both for everything you do, and I repeat that I'm glad you're working together. The one discordant note for me is the evolution of what some students do, not the majority, some students do to create new ways to disturb people who live in this town. And it is a bit of a game of whack-a-mole. You really have spring weekend down. You fixed it. Not you personally. There was a huge team, Mr. Armstrong, but it's fixed, unless it rears its head again next spring. But on the other hand, we have these pop-up parties, and some of what I understand is happening is some pretty abusive behavior towards law enforcement when they show up. Law enforcement around here is professional. It takes a lot to provoke them. The students do what they can, and that's. I don't expect you to have the answer to social media fed pop-up parties, but what you have is a bunch of kids who may not know each other. As word spreads around social media, and right now they're ahead of us. They're ahead of both law enforcement and Yukon enforcement. And I know that you'll be working on it. Thank you again.
Thank you.